This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put the South at the center. I am Dhanya, Rajendran, your host. We are recording on the 12th of March at 3:30 p.m. In this week's South Central, we look at the problem with India's electoral process. We also look at the latest Greater Bengaluru Governance Bill. Is that really what the city needs now? Just to remind you all, we are a podcast. We are available on all platforms, including Apple and Spotify. A new episode of South Central drops every Friday. Now to introduce the people on the show today, joining me is co-host Pooja Prasanna, the reporting head of the News Minute and the anchor of Let Me Explain.
Hello, and Let Me Explain drops every Saturday.
I feel like robots, we're just repeating the same thing. So Friday, South Central, and Saturday, Let Me Explain. In the studio is Tara Krishnaswamy. She is a political and policy consultant and makes an appearance every month on the South Central. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Thank you, Dhanya. Very good job. Pat on the back.
Yeah, that's because I said her designation correctly this time.
No.
See,
That's because she usually botches my designation.
And also joining us is Nandini Chandrashekar, a senior editor at the News Minute. Thank you, Nandini.
Thank you.
And joining us from Delhi is Nitin Sethi. Nitin is the founding editor of the Reporters Collective, one of India's top investigative journalists. Thank you for joining South Central.
Thank you for having me.
And before we go into the podcast, I want to announce a reporting project the News Minute and News Laundry are doing together. It's called Investigating the Impunity of India's Police. From Tamil Nadu to Kerala, Maharashtra to West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, there are many challenges of policing, but the underlying issue remains the same. We are going to have an in-depth investigation into a lot of these practices by the police, which includes what we know, the brutality, rights violation, infringing into our privacy. So we have a bunch of reporters. They're going to be led by Maria Teresa Raju. The reporters are Basant Kumar, Pratik Goyal of News Laundry. There's Anisha Sheth, Janvi, Harita Manav, Kora Abraham, Nidarshana Raju and Jisha Surya. Over the next few months, they will put together these stories, but it's really not possible without you contributing to that fund. So click on the link. It's there on the News Laundry and News Minute website. It's Investigating the Impunity of India's Police. And if you have stories to tell us, do write to us at southcentral@thenewsminute.com. So before we go to the headlines, I just wanted to ask Nitin, those who are watching independent media must be aware that the government of India has struck on Reporters Collective, which has done some excellent work in the past few years. They've done deep investigations for which they've gone ahead and won many awards. And those investigations have had their impact too, which is perhaps why the Income Tax Department which is why the Income Tax Department came knocking on their doors. And what they did is that they have revoked the non-profit status which Reporters Collective had. Nitin, what is happening? How is the organization coping with this?
So we got this order a couple of months back saying whatever we permitted you to do for last 3 years, we are now telling you we shouldn't have done that, which means journalism as a non-profit entity. What that as a consequence did was it brought a chilling effect to people who were donating to us in parts. It kind of shrunk the already tight resources that we had. There has been physical consequences of that with us not being able to support all the colleagues that we normally would at the Reporters Collective. In terms of where we've taken it, we went to the High Court where we got some part relief in the terms that it's ordered that the Income Tax Tribunal, which is the statutory body that where we go for appeal, should listen to this appeal of ours and adjudicate within 6 weeks. Usually the ITAT can take a couple of years also in listening to these matters. So that's where we are. It's still a long battle, and as we all keep saying, process is itself the punishment, not where you reach, because our principal argument sometimes is quite ridiculous when we even talk about it is they've said that journalism does not benefit society and therefore you can't do it as a non-profit. Now to go to a court in any place and say, hey, well, I would like to believe journalism does serve purpose, and I think it's kind of globally accepted. We can't be the exception to the world. Even dictatorships don't say that at times. So we will have to go back to this process, and I think it'll take a fair while for us to emerge out of it. In the meanwhile, we continue to do the journalism we can with the resources we have. We are allowed to continue to take donations, continue to operate as an organization, because we anyway did not give any tax benefits to our donors. Nothing gets taken away from them. So we continue to operate, just that it's made a life a little terrible. I would say more than a little difficult for us to do it at the scale that we were doing 6 months ago.
And imagine the income tax department actually saying that journalism is not in public interest. And that's the question we have to ask the government, right? Is this their position, that journalism is not for public good? It is not for public interest. And are they going to repeat it again and again? Because there are lots of news organizations, not lots, I think a handful of news organizations which do work as non-profits. And you're just giving an excuse to really shut them down, right?
But the caveat here is this. A large section of the media today is not in public interest. Reporters Collective is not in that category. Unfortunately, what the government views as public interest is not public interest. I think that's where the problem is. But it's something you should wear with pride, that you've been a thorn in this.
I mean, if I was the government's advocate and take this argument further, I would say then all the legacy news organizations which have got subsidized newsprint and freelance, etc., because they were serving a public purpose, should be disgorged of all the benefits they got since they were set up. So I think that argument taken to its logical conclusion is just bizarre. Therefore, we understand that it's used selectively. We and another organization based out of Bangalore, which also does fantastic investigative work. The File has suffered the same kind of orders. There are all community radios in India, almost all of them work as non-profits. There are large old legacy newsrooms that work as non-profit trusts. We like to believe, again, this is our contention against that of the state at the moment, that it is selective targeting, it's arbitrary, and it goes against all provisions of the law and the constitution. But to prove that, we have to go through the process, and I guess the onus is now upon us to do it in the hope that we can make sure that other newsrooms don't suffer the same consequences in due time. But yeah, everyone's around, and I guess we are at a stage of democracy where we have to fight these fundamental battles, saying, does journalism really matter to democracy and society?
That's true. In fact, what Nitin was mentioning about this website called The File based out of Bengaluru, they too face the same problem where the income tax department said that their journalism is not in public interest, so they can't operate as a non-profit. For people in Karnataka who read Kannada, The File is one of those websites which continuously puts out document-based stories, and most political parties don't like Mahantesh, the editor, because he goes after all of them. Nandini, you had spoken to him, right, when this happened?
I did. So what they were told is that they can no longer offer this tax exemption under ATC. That is, so they don't withdraw the non-profit status as such, but they say that these are the exemptions that you can no longer offer. Now, most of the organizations that are targeted are all very small, operating under very small numbers. So it's such a thing is very, very difficult. And to get out of it, maybe they will win it in the end, but it's a long process. You have to, hire counsel, you have to hire, qualified counsel, takes money, takes time. It's a long drawn process. You have to run around to courts. And for Mahantesh is somebody who publishes a news story every day with documents.
And he was actually laughing that there is no revenue. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yes, they, in fact, apparently when the tax authority said, okay, you're making money off ads, but there is no revenue coming off ads, there's very little in the way, and that doesn't even amount to revenue. So they haven't even looked at the site really. So it's just, it doesn't matter. You make an allegation, you issue a notice, and by the time you extricate yourself out of it, it's a good year and a half, optimistically. So yes, it's a good way to hit the operations.
Will an organization like the File survive that long? That's the question, right?
Because I think knowing Mahantesh,
yes,
but
yes. But it's very difficult.
Right, yes. Dhanya? Mahantesh used to in the morning go do Vidhan Sabha rounds, meet his sources, come back in the afternoon, write his story. Till recently, he was a one-man army. Yeah. In the evening, go and try to meet some advertisers, get in some ad money. And if I could also remind our audience at this point that, there are so many such small news organizations that are really doing some good work and struggling to survive. Why? Because we don't take ads from the Kumbh or even Karnataka government or the Tamil Nadu government or Kerala government or any of those. And we rely on you, and you can support all of us, the Reporters Collective, the File, of course, the News Minute and the News Laundry. And it takes just 500 rupees every month. And you can do something really, really consequential by ensuring that you keep media free.
Okay, so now we'll quickly go to the headlines.
Yeah, Tamil Nadu denies NEP endorsement as Dharmendra Pradhan releases government letter. Now, Dharmendra Pradhan said that he released a statement earlier today. He said raking up the language issue is a diversionary tactic and denying facts as per their convenience. I found this hilarious, Dhanya, because it's like pot calling the kettle black. BJP's and the bedrock of BJP's politics, at least the last 10 years, has been diversion and distracting people from real issues, and that's what a BJP minister is accusing DMK of.
And the letter which he released is from the Tamil Nadu government saying that, okay, we are okay with the PM Shri scheme.
Yeah.
But nowhere in the letter does it say that, give us the money for the PM Shri scheme, we will agree everything of the national education policy.
Correct.
So Tamil Nadu saying, we never agreed for NEP. And now you're saying you will not give the fund.
A select committee.
Sorry?
In fact, it says we'll put together a committee. They will study it and get back, and then we will decide based on the committee's recommendations.
Exactly. That letter says there will be a committee which looks at NEP and then we'll decide. I don't know how education minister like Dharmendra Pradhan can put out that letter thinking that it speaks on his behalf when it clearly does not.
Revant Reddy operating as a covert operative of the BJP, says KTR. And this is so funny because for as long as BRS was in power, this is what the Congress accused them of. Ranya Rao, who's the Kannada actor, in her case, this is our Power Trip headline. Yesterday, our Power Trip went out, our weekly political newsletter. Minister's shadow emerges. A Karnataka minister is said to be behind and somehow involved. If you want to know more about how he's involved, you can read Power Trip. And how can you read Power Trip? You can become a subscriber.
I've got many calls as to who the minister is, because we have only said in Power Trip that investigators believe there's a minister's involvement. There's no way that this woman could have gone in and outside the airport and cleared customs unless there was someone helping her, right? So the BJP sources told us that they have zeroed in on one of the ministers, someone they particularly dislike. Therefore, let's see what happens.
Andhra Pradesh MP offers 50,000 rupees to women on birth of third child and a cow if it's a boy.
Wow.
It's
this how to increase population suggestions we discuss every week now, I feel.
We should learn from our politicians how to take a serious issue like delimitation, like population, and turn it into a bizarre, episode like this. Will stand by Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan to present Kerala's demands to centre, says the new governor, Arlekar. I think that's it. We have 5 headlines only this week.
Okay. So we'll go to the first discussion of the week. It's not particularly about South India, but it's something that should matter, should concern Indians all across. It's about how elections are held in this country. For some time now, there has been concern that electoral rolls are being fudged, that voters are being deleted, fake fraudulent voters are being added. Now, these are concerns which were articulated in certain pockets by parties, other than the BJP, of course. But over the last few years, at least the last 2-3 years, certain media houses too have reported extensively, including us at the News Minute. We have brought forward proof that there are attempts being made to actually manipulate electoral rolls, the entire election system. The Election Commission of India, now under pressure, has called for a meeting of all parties. The opposition has understood how serious it is because they are mostly always caught napping, and they have come together. We saw a press meet by Mamata Banerjee and all the other opposition leaders. The Congress has formed something called the Eagle. It's an 8-member committee which exclusively looks into electoral malpractices. So the question before us is, what are the different electoral malpractices? How have things changed over the last few years? And how is the Election Commission of India just able to just dismiss everything as this is not true? For example, a few days ago, the West Bengal Chief Minister said that epic numbers, which are supposed to be exclusive to each voter, there are epic numbers that people in West Bengal have, which others too have. And the Election Commission had a press release. This is the press release. In fact, it's on the 2nd of March. It says that we have taken cognizance and we know that the epic number is repeating. But irrespective of that, any elector can cast a vote only at the designated polling station in their constituency or in their state. How do we take them at face value? First, they said epic number is exclusive to one voter. Now, when they're caught with epic number for more than one person, they're like, no, you still can't vote. You saw the press meet, Tara?
I saw the press meet. I think the issues with respect to voter fraud and voter IDs being a suspect are extremely deep-rooted and long-standing, especially in areas where there has been a great change in population. It could be urban areas, it could be because of immigration into the area or emigration, and we have a lot of the internal migration going on. Even in Bangalore, for example, right? If you talk to some of the experts who've been working on voter lists, you know how after every election people will say Bangaloreans never went out and voted and they're very lazy and they took off and this and that. Voting percentage is 50-odd%, whatever. That is because the denominator, which is the voter list, is extremely bloated. You have dead people on it, you have people that have moved out on it, you have people that, live in another part of town within Bangalore on it, and so on and so forth. They haven't been cleaned up. And even the local municipal lists for the, for the BBMP elections or for the state elections, the State Election Commission is, unlike the Central Election Commission, is always at work because you constantly have some election or the other in the state. Despite that you have some kind of panchayat election or, something or the other. And despite all that, we don't have clean voter lists. It's like the Election Commission reminds me of a classic school-going teenager who will wake up the night before and try to cram the entire syllabus and go and write the exam, right? Till then, through the year, we've not prepared anything. We could have cleaned the list, we could have sanitized it, there is just so much we could have done, none of which has been done. We can even appoint, we can empanel citizen groups, empanel institutions to go check on these things. We don't do any of that through the year. Just before the elections, and we'll only publish rolls a couple months before the elections, and then it'll be a complete mess. And then, the candidates are campaigning, the parties are busy, and then it's a mess.
But Nitin, just to bring you in here, I feel it goes deeper than just the problem of not clean electoral rolls, right?
True.
There is deliberate manipulation. There is fraud. Of course, one is what you said, being a school-going teenager who does not prepare, but the other is being an outright criminal, where you are fudging electoral rolls. Nitin, what are your thoughts?
If you look back over the last 15, 20, actually, I've observed this for 20 years. Because of various reasons, I've been close to some election processes as even an individual, forget as a journalist. The fact is, voter list manipulation has been part of the game for a fairly long while. If you look at records of how elections are done, particularly in the northeastern states, you've seen ghost voters up to 2-3 lakhs in a population of 20 lakhs existing till they were partly weeded out after 15 years. So these issues have existed for fairly long. I think what technology allows us to do is do it at greater scale. So there's a possibility that the manipulation can be done at scale and more rigorousness. If a party or any interested party wants to do it at scale, and it does have the cadre on ground to do it. So what this really needs is a lot of physical cadre on ground to do this manipulation. It can't be done digitally. If any party which can possibly have lots of people on ground to try and do this, they can try and affect it at scale. The question to my mind at this stage is, in an election that large, with a voter base this large, are these changes happening at scales that matter beyond individual constituencies? Because we've seen some constituencies always have this trouble and risks are there at a certain percentage. Is it at that scale where the credibility of the entire process gets questioned? I think we've reached a point where for the voter addition, deletion, and change, we do not at this moment have adequate safeguards to ensure credibility of the processes. Not that they existed to begin with. What we've also seen is sporadic evidence, some that you brought out, some that other newsrooms have brought out, where there is a preponderance of circumstantial evidence that this is being done in a concerted manner. There is enough evidence that I have seen personally that certain changes which are happening, to say changes of names and details on cards, not deletion or addition, but just changes, that they've been done in a manner which is erratic, tends to suggest that there is malice and maliciousness in how that's happening. And there's a great possibility that it might be happening at scale. Now, some of this, I think, to scale up from few instances to say, is it happening at scale and is it purported? A very conscious effort. I think there is by now some amount of that evidence adding up to say, yes, this is something that should be verified in a much more better way. To me, the question really is, if you look at election commission's logic is it's supposed to be the custodian of Indian election process, of the electoral process. In the last 10 to 15 years, it has tended to become like the lord of elections, where it says, whatever I do is right, I am not answerable. I'm not the custodian, but I'm the god who decides how it is done. Some of this doubt and lack of credibility has arisen out of the fact that the Election Commission does not believe it is answerable to citizens, that it is only answerable to government. Two, if you look at the nature of the Election Commission itself and how it works, how it's regulated, where its budget comes from, how it operates, and how it's been answering back to the state or the people over last 15, 20 years, and I'll go back as far as 20 years, it has quite literally very often been punched down, reduced, diminished by whoever's been in power. Now, clearly at this point, we have a government which is more centralized, more powerful, more aggressive on its whatever it likes to do. Therefore, the punching down of Election Commission has happened fairly more aggressively than it did in the previous governments. Bundled together, I think we are looking at a problem that needs resolution, which can come not from saying, is Election Commission coming through to the parties? It's not whether the Election Commission responds to the parties properly. Is it Election Commission, does it have a set of mechanisms that discloses transparency to citizens? Because at the end, it has to build faith in the system for the citizens, not for the few elected. And I think at that count, the Election Commission has completely failed and got worse in the last 7-8 years, starting from electoral bonds to the process of EVM, which I thought, at least to our minds, the best we've investigated. The EVM issues overblown, but the fact that the state and the ECI did not respond fairly to it transparently. The voter card issue, I think if you look across, we were looking at data from Nagaland, Arunachal and other places where there's a historical element to this. The lack of supervision over how the Election Commission does it, the lack of transparency about how Form 7, Form 8s get filled, altered, where they land up, who supervises them, is the third party supervision. I think there's a whole range of concerns there, which can't be answered by saying we'll do a set of meetings with political parties. It has to be saying, do we have a mechanism of disclosing how we do our work to citizens at large, so they have faith in us, even if we don't believe in one party or the other.
One quick thing is they've gone in the press meet, they've gone ahead and said these problems are caused due to the state election commissions in different states, how these voter rolls are happening.
That has been a pattern, in fact. I think the core problem here is, I think the two keywords we should look at is transparency and credibility. And we should take 2 steps back and look at the very appointment of the CEC, right? We've been speaking about it. If the person at the top is his own appointment is being questioned and is being seen as being partisan, right? Because you have 2 people speaking for the government, and of course the leader of opposition has no say in it, then everything that happens thereafter will be suspect. Now, the issue here is this government has weaponized everything. It's weaponized ED, CBI, IT, EC, and media, history, what have you, right? Whatever they can get their hands on, they've weaponized it. In view of that, the Election Commission has to be that much more independent if the people need to still believe in elections, right? Because we've been reduced to India is now being called just an electoral democracy. And even if the elections are being, looked with so much of suspicion, that what are we left with? That is a bigger question.
So I just want to add a couple of points to what Nitin was saying. First, he was talking about the fact that are we at a stage where the entire election can be called out as not trustworthy, right? Or are the problems limited to certain constituencies? Now, my understanding of this is that we have reached a place where the BJP is the one which is accused of doing most of these problems, right? So I think their modus operandi, from whatever has been reported till now, is to target only a few constituencies in every state. I don't think the accusation has ever been that there's a manipulation of rolls or voter deletion or voter stuffing across all constituencies. There's pick and choosing. Now, we have enough evidence which we collected in 2022 to show that there is system in place to actually circle out voters according to voting patterns. I'll quickly explain to those of you who may not have followed it. In 2022, we published a story about, now imagine when we were doing the story, we were unaware of a parallel development. The story we were following is about this small organization called Chillume. It was run by this guy called Ravi Krishnappa. He is from Nelamangala, which is in the outskirts of Bengaluru. So what was this organization doing? They had a contract with the BBMP, which is like, your local governance here, municipal corporation. And they would go to each house, and let's say I go to Pooja's house and ask her, what is your age? Have you voted before? Who have you voted for? What is your preference? What is your caste? All these are recorded in an app called
they
Digital.
Would pretend to be booth level officers.
Yeah, that's the next thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were putting this in an app called Digital Samiksha, and the wonder of wonders was that they all had a card of the booth level officer. Booth level officer is a quasi officer from the Election Commission of India itself, and these ID cards, they said, were given by the ECI. When we went to the State Election Commission, they said, no, we didn't give it, it's a fraud. So people believe, they gave all this information. So while we were exposing this, there were a lot of things we stumbled upon. That is, there was a BJP MLA who had previously paid money, lots of connections, right? On the other side, something was parallelly happening in a constituency called Shivaji Nagar. Now, Shivaji Nagar is a highly Muslim and Dalit populated constituency where a group of people, 5 or 6 people, went to the Election Commission and gave a complaint saying 22,000 voters are bogus voters. And the Election Commission said, okay, we'll immediately probe into it. And the Election Commission started probing, and they found 9,000 people were actually bogus voters. They were not acting on it because by then our Chillume story came out. And one of the constituencies was Shivaji Nagar in that story. BJP went to court and said, what about this private complaint which said that 22,000 people are bogus voters? What are you doing about it? By then, electoral rolls are published. The rule clearly says you cannot delete anyone 6 months prior to the electoral rolls, but they went ahead, deleted 9,000 people from the electoral rolls. And it's also well coordinated, right? I personally have gone to Shivaji Nagar door to door and met people whose names were deleted from the voter list, but they were very much living there for years. So there is a clear system in place where private parties are involved, where the local governance is involved. Now, we do not know eventually if Chillume could corrupt the electoral rolls. That's something that the investigators had to find. All that they found is that Chillume's servers were based out of China and some other country. So that became the huge issue, that our data was stored in some foreign server.
No, we saw their office. They were operating from a 10 by 10 office in a shady small alley, and they have information, they have data, access to such a lot of data. But Nandini, you were also on that story.
That Hombale connection.
Yeah.
Hombale. Yes, Hombale, which said that they had hired Chillume for...
Hombale is just explain what Hombale is. Yeah.
Hombale Films, they're known, they're a production house known for Kantara. Everybody knows Kantara, KGF, movies like that. This organization was actually working with Hombale Films, and eventually when our trail led it back, we asked Hombale, what is your connection with them? Because Hombale is also connected to a BJP leader who was then a minister, and they said, oh no, these guys are here for promotional work. We've hired them for our advertising, for promotion, and that was as far as it went. So it points out, so many people are involved in it. But what these guys were actually doing was really, really far from advertising. I don't know what you call that form of advertising. But it was a clear trail. And even now, what is it, 2025? We don't know anything concrete.
No, this is my problem. This is my problem. See, as a journalistic organization, what can we do? We figured out there is a private party which is collecting data. There is a political party which is perhaps using that data to clear out, to delete people from electoral rolls. And we found there's some way the Election Commission is supporting all this, right? And we also found a money trail. The Congress held this huge press meet in which they said that we will act, and the Election Commission of India did. They also stepped in saying that we will revise the electoral rolls in 3 constituencies. When Siddaramaiah came to power, their manifesto clearly said that we will ban all private parties from taking part in elections, and a lot of promises they made. Nothing has been done.
Nothing has been done.
This is
yes.
another issue. Like, what are we supposed to do more than this to show that the election process is getting corrupted? I mean, it
Dhanya, for
clearly
those who are not
infuriates me.
Yeah, for those who are not aware, private players can tie up with the Election Commission. But what can they do? They can spread awareness about
Please go
elections.
vote.
You
Now,
provide
that's
promotional
all.
materials.
These are
create,
your rights. You're
skits.
supposed to go and
Yeah.
vote, and that's all they can do. Now, your booth level officers are supposed to be government workers, right? They can be your school teachers. They could work in your local
They're
post
mostly
office.
BBMP officers
BBMP
who are
officers.
designated booth level officers during election or election related purposes. So there is no way a private party can ever be a booth level officer. So
But this is a very, very grey area, because elections at the time that the Representation of People's Act was written, elections looked very, very, very different. Today you have private agencies running campaigns. There are no parties or candidates that run entire campaigns by themselves. There's some part or parcel of the campaign that a private agency is running. Now, in that context, they are collecting constituency information and voter information. They're doing voter outreach. They are trying to find out the preferences of the voters. They send people to do surveys. They go knock on doors. Now, how do they know where to knock? How do they know who's your supporter and who's not your supporter? They have access to voter lists. If you look at the Representation of People's Act, the voter list information itself is not supposed to be public information, because it contains your address, it contains your age, it contains certain references that.
But now it is on the website. Everything is put up.
For a while it's been on the website, and it is in private hands, which means they can go as someone who's awarded a campaign contract, you can go to the door and ask for preferences.
No, but I think it is also needed that voter lists are published, right? That's the only way in which political parties can take printouts and physically check. So I don't think we should stop the voter list from getting
the
published.
Representation of People's Act is clear that political parties have access to the list. The point is whether private companies have access to the list. You and I are not part of political parties. Do we have access to a general list in the whole constituency, right? So yeah, it's different if you're a political party cadre, but that's why I'm saying it's so grey, right? What happens when a party hires a private company? Then you have random individuals who have access to the list on behalf of many political parties. They can go to the homes. They have to go to the homes to get preferences, which means you're asking these questions.
Nitin, one thing that I've noted is that, see, though there has been reporting on this, for example, News Laundry, I think, did a series from 3 constituencies. Scroll has done some work on this. Couple of news organizations have done work on how voters are being fraudulently deleted or added, right? But do you also believe the strategy of the opposition to focus on the EVM, where we don't actually have any substantial proof other than doubts, conspiracy, or speculation, that they are focused a lot on EVMs are bad, which is the reason why the attention has not been on the voter list itself?
I completely agree with you, Dhanya. And I would like to believe that the bar you set for questioning the electoral processes must be very high, both as journalists, as responsible political parties, as parties at bar, or any actor who's impinging any kind of doubt about the electoral process, because the consequences can be very debilitating. And in some places, we've seen the consequences is that people will not step out to vote because they believe anyone who's in power will anyway win, right? So it can have very deep consequences when you threaten the credibility of the process. And it's very hard to rebuild, as we all know. Reputation is very easy to destroy, whether it's an individual, an institution, or a process. The EVM process, to the best of my mind, and again, I have followed the EVM process very closely as an individual who has been involved and seen electoral victories, losses of people close to us, as well as journalists. And there is, to my mind at least, there is still not enough circumstantial evidence available to show even minimal scale concerted effort there. By all logics, I believe that I've checked, it is very, very extremely difficult to rig the EVM system because it requires a massive chain of command to be rigged up. Nobody's been able to prove that. Everyone raising doubt. And I think I'm not very happy with the even the journalistic fraternity that has raised questions around it. And I agree that has distracted away from what legitimately we all know all political parties at different scales have indulged in historically, which is voter lists. And I can say this with great surety. If need be, I can even present evidence that this is not the first time. This is not as if only this party in power in center or state is doing it. It's been done at scales. Now, which brings me to a second point. I think we as journalists also must be circumspect about, and also how we deal with opposition raising it. Technology allows you to do a lot of good and a lot of bad at speed and scale, which was not possible earlier. Whether it is serving people, as you were saying, if there's a gray space where serving is permitted, and as your panelist was saying, surveying by third party is not illegal in India, right? At the moment, it is actually it's a legitimate business activity today, with a proliferating number of consultants doing it for all kinds of parties, including individual candidates on their own. It's something which was done with less technology input earlier. So therefore, you're seeing a lot of behavioral studies being done by even political parties. There are trend mappings being done. There's mood swings being checked, which is great. I'm not against it particularly. I don't think technology is the issue. But as your panelists were saying, the question is, are we building response systems, transparency systems built on the fact that this is how elections are run today? The EVM is a distraction, I agree. And I know several of my friends that I really value and respect for their work may disagree with me. That's quite fine. But I think we must set the benchmark very high when we raise questions about this process. The parallel I will give is the Reserve Bank of India, right? We've had questionable people being at the helm of RBI for the last few years at times. The decisions they've taken are arbitrary. The kind of people who've been positioned are seen by some sections as not great candidates. But the RBI itself builds its credibility by a certain amount of transparency about what it does, right? It puts its data out. It also puts a third-party review of the economy and the impacts of its decisions out by a separate cell within. It has not entirely, it is not answerable for a fair lot of activities that it takes and the impacts it has. It has an open, transparent system of reporting back to citizenry and third-party experts. To me, Election Commission is like that for the electoral process. It is, I don't care whether Mr. Modi or somebody appoints somebody very close to him on top. This always happened. I think the worry for us should be, regardless of who the government appoints in the Election Commission, by institution, the Election Commission should be transparent and accountable. That person can't move it 5% plus minus more than that. That we don't have. I think if you look back in history, Congress also had election commissioners who were biased, etc. I don't think we're going away from there. The state has levers over all institutions in India, as we can see even Mr. Trump has in US. That is not changing. That's just the nature of who we are now.
No, I think there is no doubt, Nitin, that other political parties too have done whatever is in their capability of fudging electoral rolls. Just like you were saying, it has become perhaps more now because of technology, and that the same party has been in power for more than 10 years and they know the systems in and out. So I think it's more for citizens, right, to question how elections are being conducted. It's the party doesn't matter here. We need to have proper elections. We need to have good electoral rolls. So we have to question the process itself. And every time not get distracted by this EVMs and VVPATs. That is a question to ask. I'm not saying no, but we have to go back to the main problem, which is the electoral roll itself.
But I want to disagree with both of you on just one account. I agree that the opposition saying EVM each time has become a hoax. It's too simplistic a question and an explanation, to the point of it being silly sometimes. But the onus is not on opposition. The onus is not on journalists to crack this. I think we've somehow made it seem like...
I don't think that's the point. The point is when we question EVM, right? Is EVM functioning properly? Can EVMs be hacked? Without circumstantial evidence, when we do that, we are just doing
But we don't have the mechanisms to provide that proof, because the government in power and the Election Commission. Now, actually,
I completely disagree. I completely disagree because
to prove it beyond doubt.
No, I disagree, because there have been many journalistic efforts being made to understand how the EVMs work. And when the EVMs are brought to the voting booth, right? There's a district collector involved. There are so many officers involved. So it's not like somebody in Delhi can just decide that we are going to fudge EVMs.
No, I am not saying EVMs are hacked. I am saying the onus should be on the Election Commission to prove it beyond doubt, to protect the sanctity of the elections. We cannot say because the opposition is questioning.
There's two things here. It's very easy for the Election Commission to invite techies to say, come, here's your open festival, go on and hack it. Because we need to find the kinks and we need to fix it. What's stopping them from doing it in between elections? That doesn't mean it's broken. But come and find the kings. The systems are made robust by people testing them, by people pushing
By
them.
questioning.
I can't just believe it's robust because you told me so. You're refusing to let
but
me
the
break
problem
it.
then
In fact,
that,
when somebody
Tara,
breaks
is
it, they get arrested.
without evidence, when people keep on saying it's a problem with the EVM, it's a problem with the EVM, when we actually have a problem, which is our electoral role.
So
Why
I'm
not
coming to
focus on that?
So I'm coming to that. That is why I made the point that between elections is that the election commission cannot be a part-time entity that wakes up before the exams. It needs to, this business of having 3 people who will only wake up before a general election doesn't make sense to me. You have to have an election commission continually functional that is checking on the sanctity of these roles, right? So that sanctity, it is not just citizens and journalists. It's the elections commission's core job to make sure that the voter lists are correct, right, and accurate. Who is checking on them and why aren't they checking on them? That's why I said, why aren't they commissioning other people to check on them if they can't check on them, right? So both these things are, both the EVM and the voter list. It is not you and me jumping up and down, or just journalists jumping up and down. When a political party, or through official channels on the floor of parliament, claims anything, you and I may not believe it at all, whether it is EVM or whether it is voter list, then the onus is on the election commission to take it seriously. It's not a casual comment. You're saying it on the floor of the parliament.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so I'll wrap this up, but I want to just tell people. Yeah. Nitin, quickly.
Sorry, Dhanya, if I may interject. Even if I was to think, because I sit in Delhi, unfortunately, half my life, I might have turned into half a bureaucrat myself, having tracked them. The problem of tracking the state is you become like them. Even if I was to be conservative and say, Election Commission can't on every query respond and say, oh, please, whoever asks me and has a doubt, please come and check on me. That's a fair argument perhaps I can make as a state, as an administrative process. But then I would say, hey, because I don't want random people to come and check and I cannot open myself randomly to any individual or party, I would have an institutionalized system of audits, right? Which would happen frequent enough, random enough, which is what a lot of organizations do, what a lot of institutions do, that you have enough frequent audits done independently, given out to public, almost like Section 4 of RTI, that the data is being generated, audits are being generated, provided in public space to show the integrity of the system. The constant trigger of, say, what's happened with EVM, and I partly agree with you, this constant doubting by individuals, the government can always come back and say, hey, every time somebody asks me, I will not open up, I'll not do this, I've proven it myself once, etc. There's a ridiculousness to what bureaucracy can do to prevent that transparency. The answer is that you then establish an open process of audit, which is not triggered by individual queries, but is triggered by the fact that your regulations itself require it. I don't think we've seen that process happen in the Election Commission for the last 10 years.
You need a CAG type thing.
No. I just wanted to say one thing here, and as a final comment also, because in this audit that Nitin is talking about, it is being done. There is a committee which looks at VVPATs and at EVMs. In fact, there's a story we put out last year. It was done by Parth and Neil. We'll have the link in the show notes. But that story clearly said there is a committee which looks into VVPATs, right? Every 6 months, something they're supposed to meet and say, oh, the quality of the VVPAT. That's a machine connected to the EVM is very good. What did they find? They found that the guys who made the VVPAT, which is the so-called people who are the inventors, are part of the committee. So I invent something and then I am continuously saying, oh, it's very good, very good. One person was unwell and he had not been coming for meetings, but his signature was very much there. The other guy is now a head honcho at Gift City in Gujarat. He has got so many postings which are questionable. I think his name was Rajat Moona, if I'm not wrong. So that audit committee is also problematic unless you, of course, get independent people from outside or all political parties to be part of that audit committee. The so-called audit committee is also questionable. Do read that story. I see, for us, as a small newsroom, all that we could be proud of was that we did not just make allegations. We gave proper evidence which made the Election Commission go and revise the electoral rolls in 3 constituencies. Now, I do want to do it for 300, 500 constituencies, but we are unable to do that, right? I mean, more people have to do this exercise, whether it's journalists or political parties, but it's for all of us to ask those questions. Thank you, Nitin, for joining us, and hopefully the problems at Reporters Collective get sorted soon.
Yeah, but Dhanya, you were saying that we can't look at 500 constituencies, but there are people who are listening and watching who could make that happen, right? If more of you become subscribers of News Minute and News Laundry, maybe if not 500, we can look at 50, 100 constituencies. So make sure that you become a subscriber right away and also contribute to our reporting fund.
In fact, just before the Lok Sabha elections, Tara had called me to say that why don't you guys start a huge reporting project where you tell people to write to you and tell you whether their votes have been deleted illegally. But I said, we just do not have the bandwidth to do that kind of work. Yeah.
Because we know tons of people will write.
Yeah, exactly. And we move on to the second topic of the day, which is a discussion that matters to Bengaluru and, of course, anyone who comes down to settle in this city. It's called the Greater Bengaluru Governance Bill of 2024. It's been passed in the Karnataka Assembly. And this bill is basically how Bengaluru is going to be governed now. So Bengaluru is going to be split into 7 city corporations, which will be restructured under the BBMP. And there was a 13-member joint legislature review committee, which was led by Shivaji Nagar MLA Rizwan Arshad. We've been speaking about Shivaji Nagar quite a bit in this podcast. So they made a slew of recommendations and the final bill was presented. The bill has come under a lot of criticism because though it promises decentralization, it actually does not. And a lot of questions have been asked whether this means that the head of these city corporations will be non-Kannadigas from now. Or will this give an opportunity for non-Kannadigas to head these corporations? So a lot of problems. We have Nandini and Tara. Nandini has written a long story about the Greater Bengaluru Governance Bill for the News Minute. She's explained what this bill is about. You guys, handing it over to you. First of all, what are your, are you for the bill in the sense that do you think that all the demand that BBMP as a large entity is not able to manage Bengaluru has been solved by simply chopping the whole thing into 7 different city corporations? Do you think that gets solved?
Really, I want to just quickly come in. I don't think it is 7. It is up to 7.
Maximum
right?
of 7.
Maximum
Yes.
7. Now, we don't have clarity. It could be 2. It could be 7. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, there are 3 different issues here. One is, what are the city's problems? The second is, what is the problem this bill is aiming to solve? And the third is, does it solve that problem? Right? These are the 3 questions. If we look at the city, the first question first, what are the city's problems? So there is, what is our problem, right? Our problem is that we know that there are severe gaps in Bangalore's governance. We have issues with our infrastructure, road infrastructure. We have issues with our water, flooding, stormwater drains. We have power cuts in some places. We have climate-related issues. We have a whole slew of issues in every transport, obviously, right? Traffic. So
Building violations.
So we have all kinds of issues. Now, the BBMP is one of the entities that is supposed to look at some of these issues because transport is not under the BBMP, for example, power is not under the BBMP, water is not under the BBMP. So forget about whether it does a good job or not. As it is, you don't have a single entity responsible for all the 18 functions that the 74th Amendment says that urban self-governments are supposed to be responsible for, right? So we have a multiplicity of entities looking at these issues and they are not going well so far. So that is our problem. Now, we believe that coordination between these things is a failure. That is one of the problems. The second is the BBMP itself is not equipped to do its job properly. For example, it's been running with half the staff for many, many, many years. Most glaringly, there is no elected council. There is no corporation. Elections haven't been held for a long time, right? Since 2000.
And it is highly corrupt.
Yeah, I mean, that is true for many things. It is not unique to BBMP. It is unique to BBMP that 2015 was the last election. It ended at some time during COVID and they extended it because of the Disaster Management Act. But this is all unique to BBMP. The fact that there's a multiplicity of agencies, coordination is a problem, funding is a problem, all kinds of the staffing is a huge problem. Now, the GBA says, let's divide the corporation into up to 7 entities so that you have 7 different corporations. One problem that can address is that smaller, more wieldy set of wards are easier to administer. Obviously, there's fewer people, there's less of an area, therefore there is less of a set number of problems will be lesser. So there is a lot of value to it. In general, we know that it's easier to govern smaller areas, so there is a lot of value to it. But that is not all it says. now it is not only saying that, it is proposing what is called a Greater Bengaluru Authority. And this authority will be composed of not only members of these elected corporations, but also of the Chief Minister, the Deputy Chief Minister, various ministers from the city, the MLAs of the city, and the MPs of the city, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, MPs of the city.
If I understand this correct, it also says that anybody who resides in the city, any MLA who resides in the city, automatically becomes a part of the GBA.
Correct.
Now, somebody's constituency could be Gulbarga,
Correct.
Belagavi, but he has a house here, she has a house here, she's part of GBA.
Correct.
It could
And
have
then, of
5,000
course,
people.
the officials, the commissioners, the, all of the agency chairs and so forth.
And civic
Yeah.
authorities, yeah.
So that begs the question, what is this thing trying to solve? Because first of all, like she said, there is going to be a ton of people sitting in this. Second of all, how does this relate to local self-government? Because you're talking about the chief minister heading this. You're talking about the deputy chief minister, who's also the Bengaluru minister. You're talking about all the other ministers, the transport minister, urban development, all of that, the power, all of that comes into the picture. And then you have, of course, the various corporations and the representatives thereof. So to me, it is not as much about the content of the bill, because the content comes after you ask the question, what is the problem it's trying to solve? What is the brief on which this was? And from where does it derive its power? In the sense, you have a corporation because the 74th Amendment asked you to do so. You have a BDA because the Karnataka Town and Country Planning Act said you must have a local planning authority. So every entity that exists in the city is backed by a particular piece of legislation that mandates it to exist, without which the governance structure cannot be there. So what is it that mandates this? Where does this fit? Is it in the jurisdiction of BBMP? Is it in the jurisdiction of BMRDA? And because this is not part of the constitutional mandate. 74, this actually is in some ways anti-constitutional, because the constitutional mandate, 74th Amendment, says you should have a Metropolitan Planning Committee, an MPC. We don't have an MPC.
One thing is, historically, we've seen that most of the mayors in Bengaluru have come from certain regions. They've usually been from Old Bengaluru, South Bangalore, if I may say so, who are not very familiar even with the problems of, let's say, a Mahadevpura or Electronic City. They come with their own set of problems. This could address that, because you will have a certain level of decentralization. Mahadevpura will have a councillor from his own region, and if it is 7, then we'll have 7 mayors. That's one probably good thing. The second thing is that there will now be a forum. Our biggest concern in Bengaluru is that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, right? The BBMP has just laid a road, and then the BESCOM comes and digs up, and then the BWSSB comes and digs up further. Who's supposed to fix it? That is one of the biggest concerns. Now, that problem does not get as such addressed. It's not that these new mayors have the power to, kind of bring it all together in one umbrella.
No, actually, the bill does say that.
But
it's
the
a
GBA
coordinating
does,
function.
right?
Yeah,
the GBA does, which is who's the chief minister by default. So they all have a forum to take this up under the chief minister, who has the mandate to address these issues. My problem in this is that now the chief minister of Karnataka will also act as a glorified mayor of Bengaluru. He does not have the time to listen to the grievances of, let's say, 7 mayors. So automatically the control will go to the hands of the bureaucrats who are not elected. They will continue running the show. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, but it's a random institutional design, you see. There isn't the 74th Amendment on the one hand and the Karnataka Town and Country Planning Act on the other hand are already telling you how to run a city, how every city should be run, what should be the institutional structure for it. You should have an elected council. You should have the various commissioners, and then you have zonal commissioners. It is telling you how to do that. And it is also telling you that water and power and so forth should be under the municipal body. Now you've devolved them. If all you're looking for is coordination, then all you need is a bureaucrat, a chief secretary, an additional chief secretary, a zonal commissioner coordinating between these agencies in a given zone. You don't need to set up a Greater Bengaluru Authority with a chief minister, because what you're doing then is not the decentralization. It's really a re-centralization, because suddenly it is the state government which is now calling the shots on the local self-government. What is the self in the self-government then?
Nandini, what are your thoughts?
Tara is speaking about the policy level. I will go to the base level and look at it from a people's perspective, or rather a journalist perspective when we write stories. How is this going to be any different from what it has been in the last how many ever years? Let's talk about not having elections for not having a council for the last election was 2015. There was a 5-year body and then nothing. So the bureaucrats have been running it the last 5 years. Have they been any different from mayors being there for the previous 5 years? Nothing. So a lot of it is, I don't know how much of the problems or how much it is going to help. I was just complaining that, even in this version, for instance, take a ward committee, for instance, they have done away with area sabhas inside. That is the much smaller version of a ward committee. They have done away with area sabhas. Take the ward committee, which the councillor has to head. There is a long-standing complaint about a councillor being able to veto any of the decisions made by the ward committee, which is the most basic committee. There are citizens on this committee saying, hey, this is what we need for our area. And the councillor can actually veto. That hasn't changed. In fact, it's in court, actually. It's being fought in court that this should be removed, but it still continues. It doesn't change any problems. Then you have this assembly level consultative committee. In fact, I had earlier written a story which had upset some of the MLAs about how much of control they have now over what is happening in every lane. And they should not have that control. It's very clear. They should not be having that control. In fact, this consultative committee, apart from planning, coordinating, are also going to receive public grievances. Why? Why should an MLA do that? Why do you have a councillor otherwise? So you're not devolving anything here.
I feel like everybody does the job that they aren't supposed to do.
No, but in
Not
fairness,
do the job they're supposed to do.
The 74th Amendment allows for MLAs, state MLAs, to be part of the council. It allows.
Allows is different from how much power they wield, right? Because in these ward committee meetings, the MLAs were taking decisions.
And they are allowed to. Unfortunately, the 74th Amendment is flawed. Okay, it should not have been that way. It should not have allowed state government interference in the local self-government, and it does. Now, that said, this is the law. The only way to change it is to go back to making a constitutional amendment in Parliament. But the law not only allows MLAs to be part of the council, it allows them to take the decisions. The state may devolve the powers and the functions as it sees fit. The state can very well say, even from a city perspective, I'm going to hold water, I'm going to hold power, I'm going to hold roads, and I'm only going to give you street lights. The state can say that, and the MLAs can execute it because they are the authorities of state. So what the MLAs are doing now is not illegal. It's unfortunate, but it's not illegal.
It is not a question of illegality at all. It is not the question of illegality. It is what happens in terms of monopolizing something of what is happening in an area and taking credit for it. We have all seen it happen. When an MLA steps in, everybody knows, the councillor can be equally capable, but the MLA will step in to say, look, this is what I'm doing for you.
And we're going to see the BBMP basically spliced. Are we also going to see BDAs for each of these corporations, BWSSB for these? That's
Goodness,
like one entity.
I hope not.
BWSSB, BESCOM, BDA, they are all already at that level. This is why I go back to what is the problem it's trying to solve. Now, the first thing in acts like these is it tells you what is the jurisdiction that applies to this entity. What is the physical area that this entity applies to, and therefore what is the population of this area, and then what are the functions it can do. Now, this is a very unique, the GBA bill is very unique. There is no mention of its jurisdiction. There is a mention that will be notified later. Now, my question is, if the jurisdiction matches the BDA jurisdiction exactly, right, then the BDA itself can be endowed with some of these powers. If it matches the BMRDA, then it should be the BMRDA endowed with some of these powers. Why do you have this? If you look at the size that they have mentioned, it seems to be between the BDA and BMRDA, some 100 square kilometers above the BDA. So like a few more villages added to the BDA would be this.
But we are going to see resistance, right? Not everybody will want to be part of this whole.
You already see there were villagers that have passed a resolution creating an agitation committee and saying that they don't want the lands acquired, and they are going to petition the state government and protest against the state government. You will see resistance because it's anti-constitutional. You're going to see where is the Metropolitan Planning Committee. You cannot set up a random non-constitutional body to do the function of a Metropolitan Planning Committee.
Are we going to ignore the elephant in the room, the funds? Because none of these guys want to actually administer. They want control over funds. Unfortunately, what Siddaramaiah accuses Nirmala Sitharaman of is exactly what he's doing with BBMP.
That's why I called it decentralization.
Exactly. Keep all the funds to himself and give it to them on his terms, right? And this does it address that? Because I don't have
to some extent. It does say that the taxes generate, and this is the law as well. This is the law that comes from the 74th Amendment as well, that the property taxes or any taxes that are local taxes to each of the corporations will be held by the corporations only. The state cannot touch it. Then there are state taxes that are collected locally, which the state will disburse based on the State Finance Commission's recommendations, as it should be. That also doesn't change. The formula is not set. We never knew, and it has not been transparent, and it continues to be that way. And then, of course, there are grants in aid that the state can give, the union government can give. And in addition, this GBA will hold some funds to be able to compensate revenue deficit corporations. So if you take the west side and if you take your Rajarajeshwari Nagar, your Rajaji Nagar, those kind of areas, they generate far less revenues and they are capable of far less revenue generation. Revenue potential is far lower than your Mahadevpura, right? The east and the south have far greater revenue generation potential. So you will see, and Mahadevpura for a long time has been fighting for, we should be able to keep our property taxes.
So are we going to see a Bellary versus Bengaluru that we talk about while we talk about state funds being dispersed happening at a Bengaluru level now?
That is why the bill says we will compensate for revenue deficits and we won't starve corporations. But this is where the issue comes up. And while everybody is fixating on mayors, it is not a mayor's problem. Now again, think of East Bengaluru versus the rest of Bengaluru. East Bengaluru particularly has a very, very high proportion of non-Karnataka people. Right? And they're all recent immigrants, meaning that the integration levels are also very, very, very low. There's been immigration into Karnataka, into all states from time immemorial. So to the point that you really can't tell you really can't tell from the way people speak that, they are Telugus or they are Tamils or they are, any of that, because they're very well integrated. On the other hand, today is the last 20-year, 30-year immigrants. It takes much longer to integrate. And it's very obvious they are not Kannadigas. So what happens when you have an East Bengaluru corporation? This is where the up to 7 comes into play. If you actually divide it into 7, what will happen? There will be certain areas in East Bengaluru that are so dominated by non-Kannadigas that if you have, say, 100-person council, it is very much possible that more than 50 corporators are non-Kannadigas. Whether the mayor is Kannadiga or not is secondary to me.
Nandini, do you think that is the next battle out? Because I already see a lot of people tweeting and putting out on social media saying this is against Kannadigas.
It could be, but I think this bill has some way to go. And by the time it is implemented, I think it's a long way. But for the reasons that we are picking up, I say we, though not me personally. But yes, it could be a point of contention because there is already a lot of friction over non-Kannadigas occupying real estate. Rents going up, and you have to see one of the main responsibilities, functions or revenue generating thing for the BBMP now is property tax. And there is a lot of animosity about outsiders coming in, buying up apartments so locals can't afford it, outsiders buying land, especially real estate developers coming from out other states and occupying. So yes, this is definitely going to be a point of contention. BJP will definitely exploit it as it has been doing already. It is true. It's a fact. It's a fact that many of the areas are filled with a lot of non-Kannadigas.
New entrants.
Yeah.
But there are ways to ameliorate some of this, right?
Both of you have found problems with the GBA. What exactly is the solution then? I mean, what should we have done?
To answer that, you need to know what is the problem it is trying to solve. That is not defined. What is the area to solving the problem?
You asked me what are the areas that come under it. I said we don't know. There has to be a notification about it. So it has to start from there. What all it covers, and this is what Tara was saying earlier also. That
why do you need a CM? What is the problem it's trying to solve? Are you trying to decentralize otherwise, in which case, why do you have the entire state machinery sitting in there? Are you trying to do a coordination function across agencies? Then you don't need such a thing. Then you need a coordinating body. Whereas this is a planning and execution tendering body. It is going to build flyovers. It is going to build elevated expressways. Or are you trying to be an executive function? If so, then the planning, where is the MPC? Right? So are you trying to be a constitutional body? If not, where is your relevance? Who are you in the picture of the law? It needs to hang off. Let me give a very simple example. You take a Mumbai, you take a Chennai. There are metropolitan development authorities in both those. You have the Brihan Mumbai Metropolitan Development Authority. You have a similar one in Chennai. In both cases, it is entirely filled with bureaucrats except for one minister, the Urban Development and Housing Minister. Because that is the ministry of which it hangs. And you have the water supply, you have the electricity, you have everything that we just talked about. But just the bureaucrats, the commissioners sitting for a coordination perspective, right? And therefore, that ministry will give you funds, and that is how you administer the greater region. You have a planning function for the region, or you have a coordination function for the region. Here, you don't have that. You have the entire state machinery sitting there.
But to add to this complication, apparently there's talk of creating a new ministry which will be called something on the lines of Major Infrastructure, Bengaluru Major Infrastructure Ministry.
Not
we all
DK
know,
Shivakumar,
of course,
department, something like that.
Of course, he will head that. And this will look at all these grand projects like tunnel and skydeck and this and that. So all of that also will be taken away from these corporations. So the mayor has like road, sewage, street light, not even street light actually, putting up the street light, not put the bulb.
Just bus stops.
Bus stop, but not the flex because that probably goes to somewhere else. In that, they will also take away some parts of it because if it is part of the tunnel road, then you know where it goes.
You don't own it anymore.
So he will have 10 square meters to
So
govern.
I was at this event recently in which I think she was senior citizen. She asked very politely as to, I pay all my taxes. Why am I living such a bad life in this city where I don't even want to step out, right? Bangalore is a city, by the way, where people don't take offense if friends don't meet up, if family doesn't meet up.
We all understand.
They all understand. They're very understanding.
Very
I haven't
understanding.
seen my family for a year. Only for Onam or Vishu I may meet them. They're okay with it. Nobody wants to travel. So she asked like, why is my life like this? And I don't think any of these solutions are actually going to solve that woman's problems, right? It's going to be the same. We have absolutely no solution. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is going to get dragged to court.
Also,
It is
we don't
going
make
to.
sense.
It is
It's
telling you it's
bites.
unconstitutional.
Yeah.
It
It's a
doesn't.
very
How can
long
you
way,
be
that's why,
violative of the 74th Amendment and get it? They can pass it. After that, it's going to go to court and it's going to be stopped. I'm surprised they didn't catch it. This is my surprise. Is we have some very smart people, right, sitting in government, right, in fairness, on all sides in the parties. And I'm very surprised that they didn't catch the fact that it's blatantly unconstitutional, what it is proposing.
So the next chapter will be played out in the courts and we'll cover it. Okay, so that's all on South Central this week. We'll quickly go to the recommendations. Nandini, what's yours?
Oh, it was a bit of a tough decision, but I'm going to recommend this show just to have some fun. It's called Dabba Cartel. Guys, don't blame me. I don't watch television, so this is one of those rare things I watched. It's a great show. I loved watching the women. It's a woman-dominated show. Loved watching them. Very strong actors. I won't say much about the script. The soundtrack is fantastic. So please watch it for just that. Just the women in it. It's a lot of fun.
For me, two things I loved about that. One is Jyotika saris,
Yes.
which I want to borrow for Let Me Explain. And the second is just Shabana Azmi's gangster body
Gangster.
language. She just walks into the room like she's a don, which she is.
This is not a
Yeah.
review. Yes. Tara.
And you were totally clueless because you don't do any of this,
She
right?
watches only Turkish serials.
So my recommendation this week is a memoir by Bachendri Pal, the amazing woman who was the first Indian woman to climb the Everest. I actually cried reading that. It's a very small book. I highly recommend it. You don't even have to buy it. It's available as PDF. It is such a beautiful narrative of how she climbed, and especially as a woman and as knowing how we don't have the we didn't have the facilities then that we have now. It's quite an incredible achievement, and you cannot imagine, because it's not something that most of us do, right? Go around climbing these extraordinarily high mountains.
No, not planning to also. Yeah.
So it's an incredible book of resilience and grit and all of that, and extraordinary events as well.
Pooja?
Sure. So I would recommend that you read Caravan's piece this month, How the UP Government Abandoned Well-Laid Norms for the Kumbh. This is by Dhirendra Jha. And my second recommendation is a book by Dhirendra Jha, which is about Golwalkar. Why I want people to read this is that what we're seeing playing out now is part of a blueprint that was laid many decades ago. And it'll give us a lot of clarity, perhaps even some way of dealing with the polarization that we're seeing. So
I'm reading this book. I'm not finished it fully, but I'm quite fascinated by the things which have been mentioned. It's a book called Rama Bhima Soma by Shrika Raghavan. It's on it's on Karnataka and its cultural heroes and all its political movements and all that. It's a pretty heavy book. You'll have to pause each time and then sort of, understand this happening. Like there are chapters about Kuvempu and so many others, right? It's a really nice book. Rama Bhima Soma, that is my recommendation.
No books. I'm actually gonna recommend something way off from news cycles and the world we usually inhabit. I'm going back home to Arunachal, where we soon will have a festival called Mopin. So I would suggest everyone listen to music from our world by a gentleman called Nikom Reba, who sings Galo songs, completely different, but I thought that's what I've been obsessed with for the last 48 hours. And I would recommend, please listen to Nikom Reba and songs in Galo language.
So that's all on South Central this week. To everyone watching, we have been putting together a lot of news reports. Hopefully, they will all start coming from the next week. One is by Pooja on what is happening in Auroville in Puducherry. That's part of our story series called Spirituality Business, where we look at spirituality, the business around it, why people joined groups which are spiritual, how governments are looking at it. So one of the first stories will be by Pooja on Auroville and how the union government is trying to take over parts of Auroville and how it functions and why it's not a black and white story. We also have a lot of reporting coming on the actor assault case in Kerala. This is something that the News Minute has been covering diligently since 2017. That trial is about to get over. Within 20 to 30 days, we are expecting the trial to get over. We have a set of reporters who have been working on it. So do watch out for those stories. Thank you very much for listening to South Central. Remember to follow us on Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.